All right. Hello again, everyone. So today, as promised, we're going to go through human and social biology, CSEC, yeah. And we're going to cover nervous system and coordination. I think in the syllabus, it's called coordination and control. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing today. So as usual, just a bit of housewarming. If you need to contact me, my email address is younggenius. Please note the 2 G's .educate@gmail.com. On WhatsApp, it's 876-501-1966. You can check out my website at younggeniusofficial.com. There are resources over there that you can use. And also, don't forget, it's marathon season, so you can register for the CSEC Human and Social Biology Marathon by either going to my website, the link is over there, or you could go on Instagram, the link for registration is posted on my story every day, or you can WhatsApp me and inquire about it, and yeah, I'll help you out. And a quick, easy way to get to my Instagram, you can just scan the QR code right here, right? But if you don't want to, it's young_genius.official. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, whenever we have we're talking about the nervous system, we're talking about how your brain perceives or interprets the environment around you. So when you see things, the way you see it, when you hear things, how is it that you actually hear things? When you smell things, how is it that you actually smell things, right? So the stages of sensory processing includes first receiving a stimulus, right? So receiving a stimulus, and when you receive that stimulus, maybe you see something, right? So something goes to the eye. Your sensory or the sensory receptors in your eye will send that information, right? It will send that information to be integrated in the brain, right? Hold on. Forgive me. So it will send that information to be integrated in the brain. And from there, your brain will interpret and process that information and send the output to whatever effector or muscle or whatever gland that needs to be, needs to carry out the instructions given by the brain, right? So for the most part, sensory processing includes 3 steps. It is first, this sensing or getting a sensory input by a stimuli or stimulus, rather. So stimulus is singular, stimuli is plural. Then that information given by whatever sensory input that was, given to the body, it will be taken to the brain for integration or processing, right? And after, the brain will send out a set of instructions that will tell your body or a specific organ how to respond to the change that was, or the stimulus that was given. So motor output can be, or the output rather, can be from muscles or either glands, right? So that's what we'll be covering in depth today. Your nervous system is divided into 2 central or 2 major parts, I should say. It is the CNS, which we call the central nervous system, which consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So say this is your brain and your spinal cord, right? That's your central nervous system. And the second division would be the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. that consists of the pairs of cranial nerves. You have 12 pairs. This thing keeps jumping, forgive me. So the pairs of cranial nerves and the spinal nerves, right? So the PNS has the cranial nerves, and those are the nerves coming from the brain, cranial nerves. And you also have pairs of you also have pairs of spinal nerves. All right, so spinal nerves, which of course stems from the spine. So just a bit of recap. You have the broad thing, the nervous system. It is divided into the CNS, which is the central nervous system, and the PNS, which is the peripheral nervous system. The CNS is made up of the brain and your spinal cord, while your PNS, peripheral nervous system, that has your cranial and spinal nerves. Now, the PNS, peripheral nervous system, can be further divided into the ANS and the SNS. The ANS is the autonomic nervous system, and auto meaning self in this case, right? So auto generally refers to self, right? So this part of your nervous system controls itself, right? It works on its own. So it moves or it causes involuntary contraction and relaxation of involuntary muscles, of course, and it helps to control glandular secretions in your body. Because when we talk about coordination and control within the body, there are two ways in which signals are sent throughout the body. You're either having electrical signals being sent, or you'll have hormonal signals being sent. Electrical signals are controlled by the nerves, right? And it's very important that you know to differentiate between a single neuron. All right, let's change this because it ain't writing properly and I don't want to be. So you need to know how to differentiate between a neuron and a nerve, right? Now, the neuron is a single nerve cell, right? The smallest unit of nerve cells in your body, that's your neuron. Now, a bundle of nerves and a bundle of neurons or nerve cells actually forms what a nerve is, right? So if you're asked to differentiate between a neuron and a nerve, even though the neuron is also called a nerve cell, a neuron refers to a single cell, single one, right? When you have a cluster or many together, many neurons together, no, those are your nerves. All right. So yeah. Now going back to what I was saying, that the body sends signals, or signals are sent throughout the body as either electrical or hormonal, right? Electrical signaling is usually very fast or rapid, while hormonal signaling is a slower process, right? Electrical signaling is controlled by what we're doing now, the nervous system. And we're going to go through a few hormones today, but don't worry too much about it. And the hormonal signals are controlled by the endocrine system. Yeah. So those are key differences that you need to know, right? So now that we're talking about the electrical signals, when we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, these signals are controlled or controls involuntary muscles. So that includes like the muscles in your heart, for example, because you don't need to tell your heart to beat in order for it to beat. Hence why it's an involuntary muscle. So your heart beating is controlled by your autonomic nervous system. Your blinking is controlled by your autonomic nervous system, because on a regular basis, you don't think that you should blink in order to blink. You just blink, right? So it's an involuntary muscle. For example, another example could be the muscles in your esophagus that helps you to swallow, right? You don't tell the muscles to contract so that you can swallow. It contracts and allows you to swallow, right? As for glandular control, that's mostly for hormonal secretion, but that again is controlled by the autonomic nervous system. So you need some sort of stimulus to tell that gland that it needs to secrete a specific hormone in order to restore balance in the body, right? So an example of a hormone could be, for example, insulin being secreted in response to having a high blood glucose level, right? So, yeah. So the stimulus would be you having extremely high blood glucose, and then the pancreas will secrete insulin, and the insulin will bring the blood glucose level back down to the normal set point. However, glucagon does the opposite. Let's say you have a low blood glucose, all right, level. Your pancreas will in turn secrete glucagon, and the glucagon will cause your blood glucose level to go back up to the normal set point, right? So that's the autonomic nervous system. It deals with self-regulation. Now you have the somatic nervous system, which controls the voluntary movements in your body. So for example, let's say you want to raise your hand. You raise your hand, that's a voluntary process. You are telling your brain that, hey, I need to raise my hand. Your brain processes that information and then sends an electrical signal to the muscles in your arm, which causes it to raise. Right? So that's somatic. That's the somatic nervous system. It's the voluntary. It controls voluntary movement. So autonomic is involuntary, while somatic is voluntary. All right, great. Now the autonomic nervous system can be further divided into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic divisions, right? The sympathetic division is also called the fight or flight, while the parasympathetic is the rest and digest. So the sympathetic, the way this works is, for example, let's say the sympathetic, fight or flight. Whenever, you're placed in a dangerous situation, your body reacts in a certain way, right? It will, for example, you'll feel your heart rate increasing. It will start to speed up and things like that because, you're scared, right? So that's how you'll react. So it's also the smooth muscles in your gut or your leading to your stomach will contract. So you will lose your appetite. That's why you don't really feel like you want to eat when you're nervous, because all that blood supply is going to other areas of your body that might need that blood supply. For example, the muscles in your legs to run, right? Or the muscles in your arm to either push or lift something, right? So that's the sympathetic, while whatever is good for resting is controlled by your parasympathetic division. So rest and digest. All right. So just going over the broad thing, the nervous system is divided into two major parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and the spinal cord, while the peripheral nervous system is made up of the cranial and the spinal nerves. The peripheral nervous system is divided into the autonomic nervous system and the somatic nervous system. And autonomic deals with involuntary muscle contractions and glandular secretions, while the somatic deals with all the voluntary. The autonomic nervous system can further be divided into the parasympathetic division and the sympathetic division. Parasympathetic is for rest and digest, while sympathetic is for fight or flight. Okay, so that's that. All right, let's continue. Now, when talking about the neuron and basically the structures that you need to identify, these are the most important. You have the dendrites, which are the long processes here from the region, this part here called the cell body or soma. So it's right here, soma or cell body. So yeah, then you have right here, I'm going to mention it. This is a cone-shaped portion of the neuron is called the axon hillock. And of course, I'm going to go through what each structure is responsible for, but we're just identifying for now. Within the soma or the cell body, you have the nucleus, which is right here. Then you have a long process going down here, and that's the axon. And the axon is covered by some cells, fat cells called Schwann cells, right? And they're used as insulators. And of course, as I said, I'm going to go through that. Then you have at the end, you have the synaptic cleft or the nerve endings, or axon terminals rather. The axon terminals or nerve endings. And when you have the connection of multiple nerve cells between the space between them, that's going to be called the synaptic cleft. So you have an axon terminal here or a nerve ending, and to relay that signal to another nerve, you're going to have between here the synaptic cleft. Okay, so it's the space. Now, going over what each thing is responsible for. The dendrites are responsible for bringing information from one neuron to another. So from here towards the cell body, right? That's the job of the dendrites. Then you have the cell body or soma, which contains, the regular things that a cell would have. So the nucleus and all the other organelles, along with the cytoplasm, the basic organelles or components of a cell. Then you have the axon hillock, which I mentioned earlier. That's where an action potential is generated. And the action potential is basically the nerve impulse. Then you have that nerve impulse carried along the pinkish portion, and that's called the axon, right? So the axon actually conducts the nerve impulse away from the cell body after it is received from the dendrite. So dendrite, cell body, axon, right? Towards the nerve ending or axon terminal. Now the myelin sheath, that's the fatty portion made by the Schwann cells, that is used as an insulator to help for the conduction of the nerve impulse along the axon quickly. So if it is that you're missing or you have some part of the myelin sheath worn away, then you're going to see the slowing down or the retardation of nerve impulses going along the axon, so it wouldn't be received as quickly as it should. So you'll see this in diseases like Parkinson's disease, right? So they don't have very good motor function because of that. Here. Now, let's talk about the reflex arc and the different types of neurons that you have. So you have sensory neurons. You have relay neurons, which are also called interneurons because they're found in between. They're found primarily in the central nervous system, so where the brain is, right? So those are relay neurons, and it will make sense why they're in the CNS when I explain this. Then lastly, I have the motor neuron and motor neurons. And the motors are also called effectors. Right? And how I remember this, and sensory are called affectors. How I remember this is the stimulus usually affects the body, and the motor neurons or the muscles or whatever, those usually carry out the effect, right? That should actually respond to the stimulus. So that's how I remember it. So sensory signals affect the body, while motor neurons carry out an effect. Okay, so let's explain how the reflex arc works. So here is a cactus. Let's say you touch the cactus, it being no fun thing. You touch the cactus, right? And of course it's prickly, so it's going to hurt. You're going to say, ouch, right? But what happens before you say ouch is a really quick process, which is the reflex arc, right? You touch it, the stimulus that it hurts is sent to the brain, right? And that stimulus is sent by the sensory neurons. So the sensory neurons pick up that no nice, that hot, right? It sends it to the information to the brain, and the brain processes the information and say, oh yes, that hot for true. And that's where the relay neurons come in. So the relay neurons in the brain then relays that information to the effectors or the motor neurons, and that is brought to the muscles in your arm, and that is the information that's sent from the brain via the motor neurons is that, hey, move your hand, brother, that hot, right? So you're going to move your hand in response to the stimulus. So sensory neurons pick up the stimulus. It goes to the brain, where the brain processes, then relays that information or the instructions that you should have happening to the motor neurons, which are in the arms or the legs or whatever place you need to move, right? So then when that information is brought there, the motor or the effector actually moves, causes your hand to be moved, right? Same thing when you touch a hot pot on a stove. You feel the heat, sense the sensory receptors in the in your hands or the tip of your fingers, feel the heat and sends that information that the thing here that you just touch is hot to your brain. The brain processes that information and develop a set of instructions for your motor neurons to carry out. So then the relay neurons, as I said, relays or passes the baton, on the baton being the instructions, to the motor neurons in whatever parts of your body that you need to move, in this case your arm, and it's going to tell your hand to lift it up off of the pot. You can't touch that, it's hot, right? That's your response, ouch. Okay, so in a bit more context here, you have receptors in the skin, and here the stimulus is a pinprick. So the pin pricks and the receptors pick up that that information that that's going to hurt or that hurts, and the sensory neurons carry the information to the brain. So this part here is actually the brain, and here you have the relay neurons within the brain that are processing the information and developing a set of instructions for the relay neuron right here, for the motor neuron to actually get. And when the motor neuron gets that, it's connected to the muscle, and in turn, whatever instruction that was given to the motor neuron by the relay neuron will be carried out. So that's how it works in a nutshell. All right. So again, as I was saying, that the little spaces between connecting neurons, that's called the synaptic cleft. So you just need to remember that sensory neuron pick up the stimulus, then it's brought to the relay neuron in the CNS, where you have your brain, and the brain processes the information and gives the motor neurons instructions to be carried out. So that's the reflex arc. And a reflex action, right, is an involuntary process carried out in response to a stimulus. So remember, it's not you wanting to move your hand because you don't think to move your hand before the thing, when you touch the hot thing, right? It's just that you touch the hot thing, it feels hot, and in response to it feeling hot, you move your hand immediately. That's a reflex response, right? It's involuntary. So that's a key thing that you should know whenever you're explaining what reflex action is. It's an involuntary process. You don't do it by your own free will. Your brain is actually doing it in response to the stimulus, or telling your muscles to do it in response to the stimulus that was felt to get your body out of danger. Another example of reflex action would be the knee jerk test done by doctors. So they take a little hammer, it's a triangular shaped hammer, and they knock your knee right here. What they're doing is stimulating the contraction of your hamstrings and quadriceps, right? So remember when we went through the skeletal system the other day, I was talking about antagonistic muscles. So when the muscle in the top part, the quadriceps, contract when he knocks your knee with the little hammer, it's going to cause the relaxation of the quadriceps, or in turn vice versa. So if the hamstrings was contracted, then the quadriceps would be relaxed, and you have your knee jerk. Your foot is going to move as a result of the sudden contraction and relaxation of the muscle in your quadricep, right? And that's going to cause your leg to flare a bit. Hence why it's called a knee jerk, right? And of course, the doctor cannot do this while you're aware of it, because then the movement will no longer be involuntary, but rather voluntary, because you're aware of it. So of course you're going to move your foot because you know that that's what the doctor is testing for. So they usually do it while talking to you about something else, just to check if your that part of your nervous system is working pretty fine, right? Now we're going to go through the different parts of the brain. This should not take long because you don't need to know all the major parts, just the not all the major part, not I didn't mean major parts. You don't need to know minor things like the olfactory bulb, for example. That's not necessary for you to know. You just need to know the major parts. For example, if I rotate right here, what you're looking at is the cerebrum, right? And your cerebrum is divided into two things. You have the two parts rather. You have the left cerebral hemisphere and you have the right cerebral hemisphere. Your brain is also divided into 4 lobes. The syllabus does not focus on the lobes too much, but I will mention them just for your sake. So the front part here, around right here, is you'll have your frontal lobe, of course, frontal lobe, right? And that's for information processing. Then easiest at the back here, and we're on the cerebrum, right? Don't pay attention to this portion down here. This is something totally different, which we'll get to. So around like this portion right here at the back, you have your occipital lobe, and that's your visual cortex. So that's where all the information about sight is processed. Then around here, see if I can rotate this a bit more. Like around this portion, right at the portion of your head. If you touch the side of your head, the part where you call your temple, the temple, right? The temporal lobe, that's your temporal lobe. And that's responsible for sensory information pertaining to hearing, right? And the taste. And up here on this flat portion, of course, so I can divide it a bit again. Let's just divide everything. Let's just divide this one hemisphere. So you have frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe is for processing information. You have the temporal lobe for hearing, taste, and them thing there. The parietal lobe is for touch, right? So parietal, predominantly for touch. And round here, so the back, you have the occipital lobe, and that's for sight. So it's your visual cortex, not SITE, SIGHT, bro. So sight, or your sense of seeing. So SIGHT. So those are the 4 major lobes. Right? Now these lobes make up the cerebrum. So the cerebrum, or we also call it the cerebral cortex. Let me see if I can rotate the way I wrote this, because I've been writing sideways from morning. So it is cerebrum, CEREBRUM, right? Cerebrum. So that big fat, the largest, heaviest portion of your brain, the majority of it is called the cerebrum. Okay. Now, going back to this little piece around the back that I told you not to pay too much attention to. This is called your cerebellum. And this portion of your brain is responsible for balance and coordination, right? So it helps by allowing you to move without errors. So to move properly, how to walk, to move your hand, it helps with spatial awareness, right? So that's why you can close your eyes, for example. You can close your eyes and raise your hand and know that your hand is raised, right? So that's the job of the cerebellum. It helps you to maintain balance and basically coordinates complex movements. Then another portion of the brain that you should know, let's rotate this, is the medulla oblongata. Let's click on it, see if they can highlight it. Right here, it's a part of your brainstem, and that part of your body is responsible for involuntary actions like breathing, your heart beating, and stuff like that, right? Then you have, you don't need to know the pons, but you do need to know the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland up here, this helps to release hormones, right? Hence why it's called a gland, right? And it's responsible for maintaining things like growth and reproduction, right? And regulating stress and sleep. Then you have, I'm looking for the hippocampus. It's above the pituitary gland. So, the hypothalamus, hypothalamus. The hippocampus is for memory. You don't need to know that part though. So the hypothalamus here, it's another glandular organ, and it releases hormones that help with hunger, regulating, your hunger, whether you're going to eat or are you doing all right. It helps with other hormones such as melatonin, which is for that's a lie. I should not tell you that. Well, melatonin, yes, but that's pituitary, and that helps with regulating your sleep cycle, right? But the hypothalamus plays a very crucial role in regulating your sleep cycle as well, so circadian rhythm. And also the major thing when you think about the hypothalamus is body regulation, body temperature regulation. So it's like the thermometer of your body. So if you're too hot, then the hypothalamus knows and tells your body how to respond to that. If it is a case where you're too cold, then the hypothalamus senses that temperature and tells the brain that, hey, we're too cold, so you need to do something about it. So examples of things that the brain could tell the body to do now, for example, is tell the muscles, your skeletal muscles, to contract and relax very rapidly. And that's how you shiver. Okay, so that's how you shiver. So yeah, the hypothalamus is responsible for that. So the major parts that you need to know, as I said, cerebrum, which is the larger portion here, right? Then you have the cerebellum, which is for balance and coordination down here. You have the medulla oblongata, which is for involuntary actions like breathing and regulation of your heart rate. You have the pituitary gland, which is for hormonal secretion for growth and metabolism. And you have the hypothalamus, which is a little bit above that. It's kind of right here. Bro, right here. Right here. There. Of course, I'm going to show you on I found an image that's broken down a bit more, that, you know, you don't have the extra, the lot of extra stuff. So hypothalamus here for body temperature regulation, regulating hunger and thirst, and also regulating your circadian rhythm, so your sleep cycle. So let's go back to the other part, and I believe that the rest is now some practice questions, which will help us to go through some important concepts. So here we go. Yeah, I was correct. So first and foremost, high yield concepts as it relates to the eye, right? Hold on. I cannot find my pen. Okay, found it. So here we go. So first and foremost, you need to know how to label the different structures of the eye. So for example, right here, D is the lens, right? Right here for B, because it's between the space right here, B is actually the aqueous humor. Or if it's pointing between, if B is actually pointing between here, then that would be the pupil, right? That's the little hole in the eye. F here is the ciliary body or ciliary, and then from that you have the ciliary processes. All right, A here, transparent portion. So that's the cornea, dome-shaped portion, right? Then right here, the white part of your eye is called the sclera. And the darker portion here is called the choroid. So it's the dark pigmented part of the eye. Then further on the back, you have the retina. Retina, which helps you to see, plays a major part in your seeing. All right, about right here, you would have the optic disc or your blind spot. And there's another spot called the yellow spot, which is a bit above. So maybe about right here, depending on how they draw the diagram, to be honest, which is called the fovea or macula. Fovea centralis, and that's for literally seeing, right? And H here would be the vitreous humor. All right. But anyways, let's look at the question and see if we have to adjust any of the, oh, I think I didn't tell you what C was. C right here is the iris. So let's see. Oh, G is the optic nerve. Did I do everything? E, choroid, or maybe it's the retina that they're labeling depending on what the question is asking. So you have to look at that because it's not very clear. So you have to use context clues sometimes. All right, so identify each of the following structure labeled. So A, as I said, cornea, that's the transparent portion. Then you have the white portion below it, which would be your sclera, white opaque portion. Then C, as I said, iris, and G, optic nerve. Now, which letter represents the structure that converts light energy to nerve impulses? All right, that would be G, your optic nerve. It converts the light signal that you're seeing to an electrical signal and carries that electrical signal to the brain to be interpreted as an image of what you're seeing. No, the other part that says refracts light and helps the eyeball to keep its shape, that's your cornea. That's the job of the cornea. Refraction of light is also done by the lens, but it doesn't shape the eye. So, yeah. Now, supports the lens. In this case, we did A, G, so that's left with C right here, the iris. Dum, 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 dum. So what's next? All right, so this portion says Nigel was previously able to read the newspaper by holding it about 20 centimeters. 20 centimeters away from his eye, right? Know that he is 55 years old, he must hold the paper 60 centimeters away from his eye in order to read it, right? So name the condition Nigel has developed and state the cause of the condition. So, let's do this. So Nigel cannot read, he has to hold it 60 centimeters away. So that's longer than the focal length, right? So if it's longer than the focal length, that means that he's long-sighted. So he's suffering from long-sightedness. I hope that's how it's spelled, right? So usually when we talk about someone who is long-sighted versus short-sighted, it's about the curvature or the shape of the eye, the cornea and lens, right? So if someone is long-sighted, that means that the shape of the lens is too convex, right? So it's causing, let's say that this is the eyeball and this is the lens. It's causing the light to be not convex enough, I should say. Let's redo that. It's not convex enough, so it's kind of pushing the light rays to converge behind the retina, right? That's long-sightedness. So in order to correct it, we're usually prescribed convex lenses in your glasses in order to pull, I think about it like this, in order to pull the light rays a bit further forward so that it can converge on the retina. Now, if you're short-sighted, that means that the lens of the eye is a bit too convex. So it's pulling the light rays forward too much and it converges in front of the retina. And remember, in order for you to form a clear image, the light rays must converge exactly on the retina at the fovea, right? So in order to create a clear, sharp image. So if you're long-sighted, you're going to have that the shape of the eye ain't convex enough, so you're going to have the light rays falling behind the retina. While if it is that you are short-sighted, it's going to be that the eye is too convex, and so it's causing the light rays to converge in front of the retina. So what type of lens would correct this problem of being long-sighted? You would be prescribed a convex lens. If you are short-sighted, you would be prescribed a concave lens to kind of push. I think about it like this: push the light rays forward a bit to fall on the retina. All right. No, Nigel's wife is also having vision problems. She was diagnosed with hypertension 5 years ago. Suggests a possible eye disease that she may develop and how it may be treated. So she can develop glaucoma, glaucoma, usually treated by surgery, by a surgical procedure. Lee's best friend told her that our eyes really see things upside down. Lee is confused by this statement because she sees everything right side up. Is Lee's friend telling the truth? And explain your response. Now, this is actually quite interesting. Lee's friend is telling the truth. Yes, we actually see things upside down. However, when the image formed on our retina is usually, say, upside down. Why? Because the lens of your eye is a convex lens, right? It's a convex lens. So convex lenses usually form real images, which are usually smaller than the actual object that you're seeing. And also it is in what we see as inverted, right? So when it's inverted, meaning you're seeing it upside down, that is the image that is formed on your retina, that upside down image. Now, the optic nerve is going to send that information to the brain. And what happens is your brain now will show you or process the image right side up so that you can see it right side up. But the initial thing that you're seeing is upside down. Your brain, the image formed on your retina is upside down. The optic nerve sends that light impulse via the optic nerve, turning it into an electrical signal that your brain receives, and your brain processes that information, making you see the image right side up. So Lee's friend is onto something. Now, what's next? All right, so we're almost done. Don't worry. So complete the statement below. This is revision for what we did earlier. Choosing the correct word from the list provided in the brackets. So we have motor, sensory, central, spinal, peripheral. The nervous system consisting of the brain and spinal cord is known as you got this one, central nervous system, while the dash nervous system is made up of the paired cranial nerves. And so paired cranial nerves, this is peripheral, remember? So peripheral nervous system, and it's made up of the paired cranial nerves and which other nerves? Spinal nerves. Nice. Now, Melissa and her parents are involved in a vehicular accident. Upon recovery, Melissa is having difficulty remembering things while her father is unable to maintain his balance. Now, suggest the region of the brain that may have been damaged for Melissa. So she's having trouble remembering things. That's hold on. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so suggest the region of her brain that may be damaged for Melissa. Melissa is having difficulty remembering things. Part of your brain that's responsible for memory is the hippocampus. And that's a bit above the hypothalamus. No, hippocampus, they say for memory, but there's also some debate as to whether the amygdala is for emotion or is it the hippocampus as well. But for the most part, people usually say, or we're sticking with the amygdala for emotions and for memory, hippocampus, right? And now Melissa's father, what's wrong with him? He's unable to maintain his balance. So which part of the brain did I say was for balance? Hope you remembered. It's the cerebellum. And people often mix this up with the cerebrum. Remember, the cerebrum is the larger portion, the big portion, while the cerebellum is the portion below it where you have the brainstem coming down after, right? So yeah. Central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system has the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. Parts of the brain, what they're responsible for: hippocampus for memory, cerebellum for maintaining balance, so movement and coordination. Medulla oblongata, as I said, that was for involuntary processes like breathing and your heart beating and blinking, stuff like that. What else did I go through? Pituitary gland for growth and metabolic process regulation, and hypothalamus for body temperature regulation and also some form of hormonal control. Yeah. Now, here we go. The doctor suspects that Melissa's hypothalamus, right, may also be affected. Right, X on the figure 1 to show the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is right here. This is the pituitary gland. Hold, this is the brainstem, but you don't need to. Well, let's just do that. You don't need to know the parts. You have the cerebellum here. That's for balance and coordination, as I said. Sensory and sensory processing and organization, planning and stuff like that. Sight, processing sensory information, sight, smell, touch, regular information. That's the whole big part here. That's the cerebrum. And remember, it's divided into different lobes, and the different lobes have the different, is responsible for the different senses. All right. So, but X marks the spot. The hypothalamus is right here. All right. It says, suggest one way Melissa's bodily functions may be affected by malfunctioning hypothalamus. So body temperature regulation may be affected because remember, the hypothalamus is the thermometer of the body. It tells whether your body is hot or cold. So if you cannot detect whether your body is hot or cold, then you're in a little bit of a problem. So yeah. Next, it says, what is? Paul and Paula are 8-year-old twins. Paul's thyroid gland is not producing sufficient thyroxine. All right, so that's hypothyroidism. So it's the under secretion of the thyroid gland, right? So just how Paul's thyroid gland would make his physical and mental development different from Paula's. So physical development, he's going to be suffering from goiter, that's for sure. right? So he'll have an enlarged neck. He'll also be tired all the time. That's true. It's Paul, right? And not Paula. I'm saying he, yeah. For mental development, he's going to suffer from mental retardation. Right? So that's mental retardation will be present. So he's going to have a lower IQ than Paula. He's going to be unable to do some stuff depending on how bad it is. But this change here or this effect is irreversible. So yeah. Now identify one effect of an overactive thyroid gland on a human adult, on an adult. Okay, human adult. So overactive thyroid is hyperthyroidism. And this is actually, it's a little bit easier to remember because for this, think about hyper and you're going to remember that everything for this is everything speeds up, everything increases. So you're going to see that this adult will have extremely fast heart rates or high heart rates, fast breathing, excessive sweating, things like that, right? So I guess you can say, hold on, can I? No, okay, don't say, well, if you remember the word, you can use it. Tachycardia, but this means increased heart rate, right? So they're going to have an increased heart rate. Let's go tachypnea. That's increased breathing rate or increased respiratory rate. Excessive sweating. So stuff like that, right? So that's what you'll find with hyperthyroidism. All right. I think that was the last question though. So yeah, I was correct. So here again, I will present you with my credentials. Wait, these aren't credentials. Contact info, right? So Young email at younggenius.educate@gmail.com. Forgive me. Instagram at young_genius.official. Also on Facebook at young_genius.official. YouTube, Young Genius Official. If you're here, that means that you know that already. My website. Go check it out. There are things over there for you. younggeniusofficial.com. Just go over there and explore their past papers and everything. Some of the folders have notes and things, but I'm not sure. I just uploaded the drive with what I have. And my WhatsApp, or you can call straight, don't matter. 876-501-1966, 876-501-1966. And don't forget, it's marathon season, so book your spot. Until next time, bye guys.